Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel discussion entitled Spirit of the Ancestors, Montserrat Christmas Merry. I'm going to begin by introducing the panelists, but before I do so, I would ask for us to observe a moment of silence for Mr. David Edgecombe, who agreed to be a panelist and who has since then left us to be in the land of the ancestors. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks, College Orator of the Edna Manley School of Creative Arts, Jamaica, storyteller and lecturer in history and culture. And she will speak to us on setting a table. We have with us also Mr. Andrew Skerritt, writer, journalist, and one who engages in studies around Montserrat issues, who will speak to us about his grandfather's table. We have Dr. Anthony Richards of Antigua and Barbados. He's an ethnobotanist, biochemist, storyteller, and researcher on African cultures. Right next to me here is Mrs. Roslyn Castle-Seeley, country manager of Delta Montserrat, and owner of a tour company, and she's interested in cultural marketing. And finally, the Honorable Claude Hogan, barrister, who has a research interest in the Montserrat masquerades. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the panel who will look at Montserrat Christmas traditions, particularly those relating to the honoring of our ancestors. So back to a brief introduction from myself, and I would say we are about to engage in a history lesson on Montserratian rituals of thanksgiving to ancestors, rituals that have been kept hidden. The aim of this lesson is to bring these practices into the open, explore possible meanings, and improve our understanding of them, and discuss ways of marketing these aspects of our culture. And just a little bit of statistics so that we can understand the extent to which we are referring when we speak of ancestors. The UN International Remembrance of Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Slavery and the slave trade are amongst the worst violations of human rights in the history of humanity. The transatlantic slave trade was unique within the entire history of slavery due to its duration for 400 years, its scale, approximately 17 million people, excluding those who died during transport and the legitimization accorded to it. 17 million people were transported, and many of those died even before they reached to our part of the world. And then you had the 56 million indigenous people who over 100 years in Central America, North America, and the Caribbean and they were killed over 100 years. This panel discussion is a tribute to those ancestors who paved the way for our existence in these lands. The tradition of setting up of a Jambi table is in tribute to these ancestors. In Montserrat, there is a belief that our ancestors are ever present, even though they exist in different worlds. In this cosmology, there's a side-by-side existence of those who are in the land of the ancestors and those who abide in the land of the living. Those in the land of the ancestors who have gone on to their Jambi country, we say, are believed to be ever present. And respect and remembrance of these ancestors is what is expected of those in the land of the living. The setting up of the tradition of setting up of a table to the ancestors on Christmas Eve has been etched into the national story about Christmas, even though it is no longer widely practiced. I will leave the reason for its decline as a practice for another discussion. But George Irish, that great Montserrat scholar, who is now in the land of the ancestors, understood the significance of the practice as a unifier of family and community. He fashioned his understanding through a Montserrat folk tune entitled "Busy Week, Come Once Again, Come Lere We Go Make We Merry." Our ancestors made merry despite the horrific lives they lived under slavery and colonialism and beyond. They made merry from their memories of traditions from Africa and out of their experiences of First Nation and European traditions here in Montserrat. The Jambi table and other Christmas traditions emerged accordingly. Busy Week, as George Irish referred, was preparation time, time for cleansing house and yard, and thus making way for new and lightsome things, making way for a brighter day, a time for hope. There was also a time for reaping of provision grounds through a progging day. Mr. Clifton Riley told me that on the 23rd of December, that was progging day. A time for cassava making, the cassava having been reaped on the 23rd. Time for killing the hag, or hog killing night. And fresh meat would be available at last, because there was a period of time when under slavery, there was the enslaved African was not allowed to have fresh meat, and there were severe punishments that was meted out if fresh meat was caught with them outside of this last week in December, busy week. And so pig killing night has become a ritual, and I have seen it once and realized that men actually wear jacket and tie to do the slaughtering of pigs, which gives an insight to the authority they thought that they had when they were allowed to kill their domestic animal. The pig, once killed, some of it was conned and to last throughout the year. So between the pig, the cassava, and the other provision, and the pigeon peas, and all the other things that were harvested from the yard and ground, these were foods of resilience, and these were secured in that busy week to last for months to come. Within that week, there was a time for baking cake and tart. And there was a time for sharing. Sharing that begins by honoring the ancestors by setting the Jambi table. And this evening, the Jambi table is set. And almost everyone I spoke to had a different recollection of what goes on the Jambi table. Just before I came out here this evening, I actually went to stew some pigeon peas so that it could be put on the table, because somebody from England told me that her father always placed stewed pigeon peas on the table. And then I had to bring out Duckna because she told me that Duckna goes there as well. So there'll be fierce arguments as to what goes on the table. And she said to me, it was whatever you had. Whatever you had was given in thanks for the provisions for the year and also in thanks to the ancestors. So by that, this was a Montserrat Thanksgiving. Now we will continue to inform about the Jambi table and what's on it, but at this moment I will hand over to Mr. Andrew Skerritt, who will speak to us about his grandfather's Jambi table.
Thank you, Clarice. It's a real privilege to be part of this conversation. And because it was just like setting a Jambi table, it was a way of honoring our ancestors, and especially my grandfather. And so my essay is my grandfather's Jambi table. My grandfather was Joseph Dada Skerritt. He was born in 1903, the son of Olive and Jack Skerritt. He always talked about his father. I had to retrieve my great-grandmother's name from my 80-something-year-old mom. My grandfather was in his late 30s when my mother was born. By then, his parents were long dead, but he never let go of their memory. No, he never did. As a child of the early 20th century, my grandfather walked the streets of Plymouth and Kinsale with people who were alive back in the 1830s when freedom finally came. The spirit of oppression and hardship hung heavy in his life and theirs. Dada Skerritt was a stevedore and a fisherman. I was raised on his stories of smuggling rum and sugar and evading police patrols from, led by guys like Paddy Lee. By the time I knew him, his days of fishing and pulling trolleys were long over. Still, he dutifully showed up at the wharf every day, whether boats were in harbor or not. Each afternoon, he'd return home to have his dinner served on a tray right next to his bed. He rarely ventured into the kitchen or fussed about food preparations. No, but there were two exceptions for Dada Skerritt when it came to food. He insisted on roasting trunkfish himself, seasoned and stuffed. Trunkfish were a rare family treat. My grandfather's other occasion to care about food preparation was annual. It was seasonal. It came at Christmas time. He was assiduous about setting his Jambi table each season, beginning on Christmas Eve. There was no ceremony, but his deep desire to honor his ancestors was palpable. My grandfather was raised at a time when the lines between the living and the dead were blurred. He spoke of jack-o'-lanterns, Jambis, and other spirits as if they were real. To him, they were. Even as a teenager, enjoying the first fruits of freedom and going out at night, I was reminded one morning that things were never what they seem. Someone came in and after you last night, my grandfather told me, as an indirect warning against keeping late hours. I heard someone walking through the door. My grandfather's relationship with the ancestors was not worshipful or fearful. He understood that his universe was constructed of past, present, and future. To a generation unschooled about future planning and who were acutely aware of the capriciousness of life and nature, the past was the only thing that was guaranteed. And so my grandfather honored his ancestors, my forebears, in the manner he learned. He set a jumbie table for them on Christmas Eve. My memory of his jumbie table is one set in the living room of our wood house on Mercer Street in Jubileetown. The light was a certain yellow hue. He placed a chunk of crown cheese, a plate tart, that was set in an enamel plate, a rum cake made of fruit that my grandmother had been soaking almost all year. Then he'd have a bottle of his favorite black and white Scotch whiskey. If what he wanted wasn't at home, he'd send out to buy it. But, our jumbo table was simple. Some of you in the audience remember jumbie tables that were far more elaborate. Sauce, fried chicken, cassava bread, sorrel drink, white rum, black pudding, rum punch, ginger beer, a teacup of strong coffee, fruit cake, a ball of white rice, a ball of cornmeal. The fare, whatever it was distinctively local, an affirmation of the food and drink that had sustained us from one generation to the next. The tradition of the jumbie table didn't die with my grandfather in 76. My grandmother, Peggy Scarrett, who was almost 20 years his junior, did set a jumbie table. My grandmother was religious in a way my grandfather never could be, but she saw her table not as worship, but as honoring the memory of those gone on before. It is a tradition worth her holding on to. She intuitively understood that in the continuum of time, in a society as transient and transitory as ours, people come and go, but it was right for the traditions to remain. It was not backward to honor traditions. So I was heartened when, in my research for this presentation, I encountered a draft of the National Cultural Policy going back maybe 10 years. In its 60 pages, I found this discussion of the jumbie table. And I quote, "People are still fascinated by the jumbie table, another activity that involves ancestral spirits. Thus, there's a kind of communion between the living and the dead through sharing a meal. What is really significant to these manifestations is community reliance on the wisdom of ancestors and the problem-solving capacity which resides in abiding bonds. This sharing is figurative. Those who have left us have no more need for food, but by their example, their lives guide and inspire us." My grandfather understood that ancestral wisdom. He lived with it his entire life, and in a way, he passed it down to me. The past remains my indispensable teacher. The study goes on to further remind us of what was past. It does more than that. It leaves us instructions for us to follow. In order to foster traditions, the study calls for tradition evenings organized when selected folkways, such as the jumbie table, jumbie dances, jumbie dance music, and traditional products like ginger sticks, cassava bread, and cassava flour can be exhibited in live settings. The study also called for arranging radio and television discussions on those elements of culture that have been lost. It also encourages citizens and residents to support local TV and radio programs that discuss recipes, jumbie, alternative medicine, literary reading, including plays. This conversation that we're having tonight fulfills that, fulfilling that mandate. It reminds us of where we've been and asks us to reconsider a return visit. Over the past 30 years in America, I've set a jumbie table once or twice. Each time I've done so in the memory of Dada Skerritt, my grandfather, the stevedore who sat on the clock stand with his back to the sea and his face towards the mountains, the faithful provider whose counsel each afternoon after school still resonates in my memory. He shared the wisdom of the ages with him, my grandson. And even as I participate in discussion, I can hear the masquerade drums of Christmases past. I can hear the drums, music, the music of the fife wafting from one village to the next, infusing the December's days with life and with merriment. I'm no grandfather. I'm on the path to becoming the person whose wisdom and love he possessed. I now possess evidence also that my bloodline may survive me, which most of us really, really would like to happen. I'm also aware that through DNA testing, that my ancestral heritage goes way back before my grandfather and his father, to those who were brought in chains from places we now call Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, and Gambia. Knowing empowers me. Knowing that Christmas Eve arrives next week, I will honor my grandfather with a jumbie table. I will invoke his name. I will honor his memory. I will make his tradition once again my own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Over to you, Clarice.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for sharing your grandfather's jumbie table. And we continue the discussion around those things that you've raised. But we will go first of all to Dr. Amina Meeks. I'm calling her Weeks. I'm making a monstration. Dr. Amina Meeks, so that we get a little bit more about setting a table for ancestors.
Thank you very much. I begin by giving thanks to the Creator, source of all that we are and ever hope to be. And I continue by knowing that the ancestors are here and present, although we might not be able to see them. Some of us can and some of us do. And some of us buck with two and say, oh, what have me buck me to upon? Is an ancestor saying, you never see me, you know, I have no manners. All right, so my name is taken from that great queen of the old Zaria kingdom of what we now call Nigeria. My Nigerian friends are very upset when I say Amina because they say Amina. So that's okay. I know you are speaking about me. I want to make just two observations. One clearly is something I have to do further study on because it didn't occur to me until we sat down tonight. And that is the Sam Sharp rebellion in Jamaica, which led to the final overthrow of slavery, and which started on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. That seems to me, in this dispensation, to be of extreme importance because of the second thing I want to say. All of us across the Caribbean do not have a Christmas. We have a Christmas season. We have a Christmas season. And the Christmas season starts at different times for different ones of us. But the Christmas season end up on New Year's Day. And so when Andrew spoke about the cleaning that would happen on Christmas Eve, that resonated with me. My father, who I will refer to, in fact, this thing is all about my father, Jonathan Blackwood, who we call Mr. Johnny, in my adult years once told me that me never have no Christmas ambition. Because part of what the subtitle of what I'm going to be presenting is searching for meaning. And sometimes we behave as if we always knew there was meaning to be searched for and we went after it. And that's not always true. Sometimes meaning lick in our face and say, you know, see me, you know what this thing mean. And so in searching for meaning, I have discovered many things. I went to one of those schools where you were taught to eat open-faced cucumber sandwiches and how to remove your tea bag from your cup before you supped. And at that school, I never told anybody about my father's rituals during the Christmas season. So I grew up disconnected in the way that Carter G. Woodson talks about the miseducation of the Negro. I grew up very disconnected from who I am supposed to be. And when I was a big woman, my father lived with me. I was his caregiver for the last 10 years of his life. My father get up one day with him whitewash one Christmas season, and him going to whitewash the sidewalk, and him going to whitewash everything round the yard, including all the tree trunks. And me said, Mr. Johnny, what you do? Because I had learned to be ashamed of it. And my father said, you don't have no Christmas ambition. And that's part of the Christmas ambition, to clean, to lay fresh linoleum, we could even call the word. And you wake up Christmas morning and the whole place smelled clean. So I lived for a little while in Antigua. In 1995, I was still living in Antigua. But while I lived in Antigua, I would make the trip to Jamaica for several occasions throughout the year. The Christmas season was one of them. In 1995, I invited my father to join me in church with an extended, almost family member. So she's not really blood family, but she's the grandmother of my good friend. So she's family. And she said, come to church, and me invite my father. He did so willingly and happily. After church, we sat down to a meal. During the meal, he, my father, released a peal of laughter, which has been made famous as part of my inheritance from him. I laughed just like my father. And then he said, daughter, you know, it's 39 years now was the last time I set foot inside a church. I knew instantly, as spirit always allows us to know certain things, that my father had made a superhuman effort to please me. Not only did he explain that he could read and interpret the Bible for himself, but he added that every Sunday morning he would listen to his favorite preacher on the radio. Me get the message loud and clear, and perhaps you get it too. But long after my father died, and my father died in 2003, I was having one of my conversations with the also transitioned theater master, Charles Hyatt, when Charles, who perhaps was in my father's age group, stopped me mid-sentence with, tell me something, Amina. Your father never said nothing yet. Because all my conversations with Charles had apparently been peppered with, as my mother would say. That, as they say in Antigua, that statement by Charles Hyatt, brought me to me roundabout. As a matter of fact, yes, my father said many things. My father did many things which have had eternal impact on my being. One of them was the cleaning the yard before Christmas Eve, and the other one was for New Year's Eve. My father would set a long table in the middle of the yard that he had cleaned. He would put on it a white tablecloth. He would put lots of other items which made the table beautiful and enticing. There were some special items in the number 7, the number of people in my immediate family. My parents, Miss Pearl and Miss Ajani, my 2 sisters, Annette and Andrea, and my 2 brothers, David and George. George now resting with the ancestors, if the ancestors ever do rest. Those special items never changed in number or quality, no matter how many other people were present. Mostly my Aunt Ina, sister to Miss Ajani, and 2 uncles, Kentish and Linval, brothers to my mother, Miss Pearl, and sometimes her sister, Auntie Dottie. I say their names now deliberately in recognition of their presence and their blessings on this occasion, for which we give thanks to Sister Clarice. So what were those 7 items? Running down the center and length of the table were 7 clear glasses of the type that remains in the cabinet and only come out for special visitors. And indeed, Mr. Johnny was expecting special visitors because he had called them. Each glass was accompanied by its own white candle, lit and shining brightly. Each glass was filled with still room temperature water. None of the sparkling thing we put in the fridge, still room temperature water. Floating on the top of the water in each glass was one water crackers. Please note in Jamaica, what crackers is singular and crackers is plural. So one water crackers in each glass in the language of the people. There would be joyful singing, storytelling, guessing of riddles, and yes, reading of scripture, mostly the Psalms. Only my father seemed to know when the special visitors had arrived. Sometimes he would go to the gate of the yard to welcome them and escort them in. Sometimes he would just signal to them and invite them in. Sometimes he would sing, and I tried to remember the entire song, but I couldn't. I only know say there was a man in a khaki suit. That's how it started. Man in a khaki suit outside I'm gate, and him sing and sing and sing, and would end up with "Come in," and he wouldn't stop singing "Come in" until the man in a khaki suit "Come in." Today I can say, together with these unseen assistants, but I did not know that then. I thought it was only my father who would walk around the yard with a buckle, sometimes give chase to all who were not welcome. And you would hear him say, "You are not welcome," and chase them round the yard until he caught them and bottled them up. Then he would race out the gate and return without the bottle. I learned later that he deposited these unwelcome visitors to the nearest crossroads. The singing would continue uninterrupted until he returned. I have tried to remember if any of my siblings and I were ever perturbed by this act, which functioned as an understood secret among the adults. At some point, they would sing, "Mumma make you plant the pole in a me yard. Him, for me no come here fi make botheration. Him, me only come here fi preach revelation. Why make you plant the pole in a me yard? Him." Closer to midnight, each of the glasses and their accompaniments on the table would be blessed, and my father would address them individually and make his petition known. We were to be assured that for the coming year, we would not want of the basic things in life, sustenance and the light that would guide us through good or challenging circumstances. After that, the table would be broken. That's the term, because there were other things on the table. There had to be a duck bread, delicious foods and drinks. The duck bread and fruits were first plated out for them other one and placed at strategic spots around the yard. Only then would the rest of us be fed. The children would be fed first. I don't really know how the eating order went after that. But after this, Miss Pearl asked us if the food looked sufficient, a wonderful word which the Jamaican peasants use, and it means something specific. Is it sufficient? In other words, not take more than you want. And then she would tell us that we could always come back for more. It was always sufficient. So we hold the corner upon the step, the five of us, sit down upon the step, and we gone off in our own world. I had no words for it then. But if I had to describe how I felt using words and phrases I now know, I would say it felt like therapy. For people in theater, long live David Edgecombe, we would say it's dramaturge, like a cleansing had taken place, like we had been rid of all that had not served us well in the previous 12 months, and room had now been created to take us to a higher level. None of the adults sought to explain anything. This ritual is learning by participation. Everything was as natural as dressing up to go out to Saturday morning matinee, which was our next special occasion. Nobody never say, you want to go to an evening show? The answer is no. Saturday morning matinee. That was my mother's, Miss Pearl, magical marker of your obedience. You go to Saturday matinee and you don't ask about nothing else. So I bring in Miss Pearl because it is almost impossible to talk about one without the other. They seem to have had an agreement. Miss Pearl insists we go to Sunday school, but Mr. Johnny insists we come at him table. So back to Mr. Johnny on New Year's Eve table. The out of order interruption by Charles Hyatt about if my father never said nothing yet brought up more meaning than I explained to him or was even able to acknowledge then. Firstly, Mr. Johnny never objected to the fact that Miss Pearl insisted that we have to go to Sunday school every Sunday, every year end. Me and my siblings go home with the largest amount of prizes that any child could have win for Bible knowledge, participation, and attendance down a Philadelphia Gospel Hall of the Brethren. And if you know anything at all about the Brethren Church, you will know why my father did not object. Because we couldn't straighten our hair, and we couldn't wear mini skirts, and we couldn't be involved in all of the other heathen practices. So it's okay if my mother sent us go to that church, because he wanted us to be proud of his maroon heritage and utter the names of Sam Sharp and Paul Bogle with pride. And although my parents used to dance at Marcus Garvey's Edelweiss Park on a Sunday evening, it almost seemed like him never mentioned Marcus Garvey's name. It's just something in them blood. But he spoke a lot about Sam Sharp and Paul Bogle. So that my father joyfully attended church with me that Christmas Sunday was not just love and respect and everything else you want to put in the mix. It was a lesson about the all-encompassing power of everything which is holy. I'm coming up now to my last paragraph. One time, a man named Kevin Baldeus did write up a review of a show I did in Barbados. In it, he said, quote, Amina Blackwood Meeks is always invoking spirits, unquote. Me read and me reread the script a million times. And me couldn't see where Kevin Baldeus sing a talk about. And me read it again. And me read it again. And for the first time, I saw my father all over my creative writings. My sister Andrea continually says to me, you're just like your father. And yet, Charles Hyatt had to ask me if my father never said anything yet. The teachers among us might remember hearing that children learn by what is taught, but they learn more by what is caught. I caught me in the rituals my father performed. If somebody dead, if somebody married, if somebody have a birthday, if we're shelling peanuts on a Friday, so that my parents can go to market on Saturday morning, go sell peanuts. He performed these rituals as naturally as we wake up in the morning and brush our teeth. It was my father's voice I heard when emancipation was put back on the national calendar. And instead of going out to the first vigil, I decided I wanted to commune at home with the ancestors and invited a few friends to join me in this. It was my father's voice I heard and obeyed when I said, let's be quiet for the 5 minutes leading up to midnight and allow ourselves to feel whatever we feel. It was the longest 5 minutes in my life. 18 years after his transition, we still put a duck bread on the Christmas table, and we still break a duck bread on New Year's Day. In my father's rituals, I acknowledge that I am never alone. I know what it means to experience the power of calling them other one by name and knowing that they respond. And I still ask them to provide the light that guides and the sustenance we need for every leg of every journey. Give thanks.
Give thanks. Thank you very much. And we are very pleased here in Montserrat to hear that our Jumbie table and your father's table have much in common. And we'll continue the conversation now with Mr. Claude Hogan, who is going to get off the table and do a dance.
Okay, no problem.
So a dance for the ancestors is what Cloud will speak to us about. You, oh, you really dancing?
Yes.
All right.
Masquerade.
No, that I don't look like the masquerade
I
at all. You need to move your shoulder.
I've been out of practice.
You're to
Put it
practice.
that way.
Okay, then.
But thank you for having me. And indeed, I'm to talk about a dance called Masquerade. And in every society, there's a bit of masquerading that goes on as people try to basically use their different skills and whatever other abilities they have to get ahead in life. Let me start off, of course, by thanking you, Dr. Barnes, for inviting me here to share in this, and also to recognize the footprints in the sand that I'm following in doing this research over the last few years. Includes that of David Edgecombe, the late, who is, as you say, is now with the ancestors. And I think I did not marvel too much at the level of respect and adoration and lamentations following the passing of David. Because David basically is a man who gives us a good example of life in theater, which is exactly what the Masquerade does, is give your life as theater on the streets. And you have to understand theater as a mass communications tool, which goes, in some senses, beyond ordinary human intellect, which is why David would be considered great. They're trying to use that art form to bring into your consciousness things that you would not normally think about every day. Or they're trying to also send messages, warnings, advice, and even things about their own experience from which you can learn so you can be better and more powerful in life. This is what David Edgecombe would have been doing. So I would not be surprised if millions of people, having ever contacted him at any time, or even read his stuff or had some interaction with his theater, which I did in Montserrat and in the Virgin Islands, that you would see things that you normally would not see when you interact with David or you would look at his plays. It's the same thing with the Masquerade. The Masquerade music came out of Africa from among a people, African people who were brought here under forced labor. They were enslaved. They were enslaved to bring about what we now call basically the British Empire, now in dissolution, and some say in regrowth with the new thrust to go it alone and create a new global Britain. But why did we end up in a country, or in countries in the Caribbean? The French had masquerades too, but I'm going to deal with the English. Why did we end up having to masquerade? Because slavery forced the Caribbean person to have to survive through communicating and sharing with the fellow slaves, which was prohibited for 11 months and a week out of the year. Slaves were not permitted to communicate in any form with each other until the end of the harvest season, which in the case of Montserrat would have been the Christmas season in December. And that would be the second week in December, starting down to busy week, as you said. So what they did is that they had to come up with ingenious ways to share with other fellow enslaved persons what was the experience on these other plantations. How did they manage to maintain such stoicism? How did they manage to be heroes still? How did they manage to even maintain any sense of worth being enslaved and punished all day? So they brought with them this dance, this music, the kettle drum, the fife, the boom drum, and the shak shak, and they added the fife, and created this music which Dr. Barnes said you must also move your shoulders. And they learned to move every part of themselves. And we are talking about noble people who were stolen from palaces. They were princes and princesses and queens. Some were even protected by fellow enslaved because of where they were brought from in the high esteem that they were, which is why sometimes I still think I'm the son of a prince or a king, and I behave a kind of way, because it's in my genes. So this masquerade came over in their genes, and they had to find a way to express themselves. And so they became even more powerful than the master, especially at year end, when the master had to tolerate this 3 weeks of festive season. And they created the dance in a way as if they're paying homage to the master. So they had ribbons on their clothes. They were like mummies, so you couldn't identify them, or like people coming back from the dead. All of that is what the masquerade looks like with the mask. And the puppet on their head, the mitre of the Pope, that was part of mocking the Catholic Church, which was the dominant church in those days. And they also had the cart whip, which they were using. Today we think it's just to make noise, and the children are excited when they hear the cracking of the whip, but it's actually the slaves were using the whip and lashing the master with that whip, personification wise. You know, it's a pretense by using the whip, and at the end of this whip were the masters really who they were mocking or whipping. So it's through this device of the masquerade and the dancing that they were able to maintain this sense of hope and triumph over being enslaved. And you might ask me, well, why did they need to create this new form of themselves in a more powerful way, although they were enslaved? Why did they have to mock? Why did they have to do these rituals? And I want to turn to a page in my study here and to share with you a list of things that we don't think about when we are going through life as to why we become the powerful human beings that we should become if we did think about them, or if we live in a country where there are enough people who are thinking together about these 6 ingredients, 6 fundamentals. And these are captured by economists like Sir Arthur Lewis, Nobel laureate, that if you want to maintain a sense of power and control, you have to have a sense of education. You have to be educated about something that you're about and where you're going with that education. You have to use that education or your studiation to maintain what they call self-esteem. So what happened, no matter what happened to the enslaved persons, they maintained that they were still royal. And they were still able to fool the master. As brilliant as he thought he was, every day they were playing a game with the master. So they were always ahead of the game. You have to have a sense of respect for or find and share leadership. And so if you see in the masquerade, you have 6 or 9 in our troop in Montserrat, the leader is actually directing the other masquerades, and every dance is a choreography. Everyone is doing the same thing. That is why it looks so beautiful. And that is part of the leader makes those decisions, and you have the 1 to 3 to the 5 quadrille. Number 5 quadrille is probably the most important in the communications tool of the masquerade arsenal. In that quadrille, number 5, the masquerade can move their body in ways that you cannot imagine. And the folk songs that they used in those days, which dropped out of the masquerade, but it was folk songs they started with, together with the dance, would tell the other slaves from the Watts estate, the Hogan estate, the Meade estate, or the Lewis estate, how really grievous, how really challenging it was for them throughout the years so far with their masters and the slave drivers. Just through the dance, they were communicating what exactly happened with them. So the slaves would share in these and look at these dances, and they would know which was the worst slave plantation of that year, just from the dance. Then you have freedom. They were free to do this. They had freely cultivated this part of their culture and reenacted it in real life. So because they were able to hold on to that level of freedom, have leadership, self-esteem, and education about it, they were able to maintain what we need, even today, a sense of identity. Those are the 6 ingredients that even if you don't think about them, because people just go to work every day and think about putting food on the table, but these things must be at the back of your mind. And they probably are already, because our parents brought us up to have respect for and forced us even to make sure we were educated. That is why education is so very important. So that is why the masquerading became so important in terms of creating that cohesive force which enabled us to evolve today as nations in the Caribbean. Because if they didn't do these things, they would have become lost, and maybe they would have even become what they used to describe us as savages from Africa, when Africa was never home to any savages. Africa was home to civilized, decorated, royal people who got along and did what they had to do to sustain their lives. And some of the patterns of life we even have in the Western world, we call it today, were borrowed from Africa, but yet they would say that Africa, the savages came from Africa. But no, we brought a lot of the good things, if not all of them, to the Western world. And I want to tell you a couple of other things about the masquerade. So when you see the masquerade dancing, you have to think about them as affirming identity. You have to think about them going into a sense, sometimes they're going into what Howard Ferguson in one of his books called, they're in a trance. They're actually transmitting information. I actually believe that we do no harm if we were to invest public funds in actually preserving and translating what masquerades are doing. Not only masquerading us out of slavery, but how we can use those tools to masquerade out of neocolonialism or imperialism or whatever we call it now. And in the case of Montserrat, we have to masquerade out of being taken back into the United Kingdom as a territory which is owned by the United Kingdom and British people, as opposed, and people tend to have a problem with the difference, to belong. And what we want is to belong, since we are already here, to the British Empire, so that we can maintain our own identity, our own culture, and that we're, in essence, if they try, and I know that the masquerade is in us, to take us over, it will not happen, because the spirit of masquerade will make you want to be independent. People will say, okay, Montserrat is probably one of the countries in the Caribbean, never went for independence. But we have always been an independent people. And this masquerade spirit in us is what keeps us and makes us assert our independence, that we want to run our own affairs. So when you hear things like, okay, the public service will run itself, we know that that means that somebody else wants to run it for us, because it can't run itself. No plantation, if you ever lived on one, where the slaves run themselves, or the workers in this day and age. And naturally your spirit will be kindled against any thought that somebody else had the solution of how you should run your affairs. So Montserratians are independent people. And this masquerade spirit that we have, unfortunately, we have not been deploying it to its maximum, to the extent that it is justified when you're protecting your identity, when you're protecting your freedom, when you're protecting your children, when you're protecting your culture. So we have to belong to the United Kingdom, but we have to belong the way we are. And we do not want to be owned, and there's a big difference. And I do not believe it's possible to own overseas territories, for example, because the spirit of masquerade will kick in. And you hear it every day, the lethargy at work, because it's going to happen. It's going to be automatic. So towards the future, you have to try to be witty, be creative, be agile, be skillful, be able to communicate across cultures without uttering a word. That's the art of masquerading. I rest.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogan, for deriving, identifying meaning in the masquerade, and for encouraging us to invest in it and harness it for the betterment of our people and for the betterment of development. And so at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Castle-Seeley, who is going to speak to us on marketing of our traditions. And
Can I just interrupt a second
Yeah.
to say that I've had a number of reports that the YouTube link is giving problems and so on. So could somebody look into that, please?
Okay.
Right, thank you.
He got it. Oh, sorry. I was desecrating the jumbly table with my script. Yes, script.
Is it on, Clarence?
So let me take off my pen too, off the jumbly table. There was no pens in the jumbly table days, right? Maybe a pencil?
This is for people who are expecting the live stream. Unfortunately, the internet is acting up at this moment. So we are going forward. What's happening on Radio Montserrat is happening. And then you can pick it up on live stream. You can pick it up after this session, yeah.
Okay, I want to thank Dr. Barnes for asking me to do this. And it's especially significant for me to be able to do this because I think that sometimes, a lot of the times, people don't always quite understand the role of tourism in the development of a country. I think I've heard people say that we should diversify away from tourism. The Caribbean should find something else to do. But I want people to look at the rest of the world. Look at England. They have internal tourism. Look at Asia, America, wherever. It is tourism that is really the great generator of income for the world right now. And it's important because people can travel, people want to see things, people want to have new and different experiences. And so tourism is actually the income generator for world income at this point in time. It may change, but right now, tourism is where it's at. I want to focus on how all this cultural information we just heard can be translated into income. Culture is actually one of the largest and the fastest growing global tourism product. Whether we call it heritage, whether we call it tradition, if we call it culture, if we call it creative industry, it is being used to promote destinations. It is being used to highlight the attractiveness of destination. And it is being used to differentiate destinations in a very crowded global marketplace. Tradition is being used to give destinations competitive or comparative advantages, to brand and to market destinations. As I said, to create income. Then the income will support and strengthen cultural heritage, cultural productions, and cultural creativity. Culture, therefore, has incredible growth potential. the major source of economic development in many international countries is actually tourism. Tourism allows us to add to and to develop our stock of cultural assets. Now, you're going to ask, or you could ask, what does any of this has to do with Montserrat? How can that bring meaning to Montserrat? Indeed, you could also ask what it is we have to offer in terms of cultural traditions. But you just heard Claude. You just heard Andrew. You just heard, forget the name. Amina. Clearly, culture brings something that is really significant in terms of our development. All 4 traditions that we have listed here tonight can be marketed as a tourism product. No. If we talk about, Clarice took some time, Dr. Barnes took some time to explain what progging means, and that's interesting because I knew a little bit of what it meant, but not all of what it meant. And that, I'm sure, is also the experience of a lot of other people, not just me. Progging and hog killing, they're old Montserrat traditions, but they can become new tourism products for Montserrat. Dr. Barnes is the museum curator, and she has already begun a journey of what I want to call the Chronicles of Montserrat. She has already done the Chronicles of Equiano. We have done the Chronicles, she has done the Chronicles of the Mighty Arrow. And soon, I think there should be Chronicles of the Irish Slave Rebellion, the Montserrat, the Soufriere volcano eruptions. And these chronicles will be featured in a cultural tourism product right here in the National Trust Museum on a website to be formally launched in the new year. Now we can have in the Chronicles of Montserrat, progging and hog killing Christmas chronicles. And we can extend this into a gastronomical and agricultural tourism product called SALT, S-A-L-T, experience in tourism lexicon. What SALT means is sea and land taste. What this is a cultural experience of bringing to the fore an atmosphere about the sourcing of ingredients, the preparation, and the consumption of local food. So what we will do here, we will have the experience, the authentic experience, and that's a word that is being used a lot in tourism these days to say that this thing is really true to the country, and that so you can taste it and touch it and see it and smell it and feel it. And this experience, this SALT experience, is a tourism product that is being used by a lot of very successful international tourism organizations. It is actually what's happening in tourism is that we are moving away from sea, sand, and sun and shifting to an experience that is literally and figuratively the taste of the destination. So all of the information that Claude just spoke to about what encapsulates the Masquerade, that can be turned into a tourism product that will give life to Montserrat and other Caribbean islands who also have masquerades. I remember the question I think people can ask is, how can you turn progging and hog killing into a tourism product? I lived in Barbados at the time when they were developing crop over. They took something that was historically Barbados, sugarcane production, at a time when the industry was dying, and they turned it into an incredible activity. What is crop over today? What does crop over contribute to the Barbados economy. And what they did was took activities that were related to the sugarcane field, the growing, the cut, the reaping, the use of the conversion to rum, whatever, and they turned all of those activities into a tourism product. Of course, they had to add to it because they had to create a product. So they had to add landship dancing, they had to add Queen and King of the Crop, they had to add calypsos, competition, they brought in food, and then they turned this into this incredible cultural production that is actually the biggest activity on the Barbados tourism calendar. We can do that here in Montserrat with the activity we have. We could take St. Patrick's, we have Calabash, we have the literary festivals, we have Christmas festivals. We can take each of those festivals and turn them into not just one cultural production and cultural event, but four different ones. We have cultural assets that no other country could boast of. We could boast of A Studios. We can say, hey, you know where Elton John wrote his greatest hits? In a place called Montserrat.